All right, so now it seems like we're live. Sorry, had to add another another setting. This is a new setup here for the live stream, so we're still kind of working out the kinks. So let me know what you see. Let me know what you hear. Are you seeing the video the way you should? Are you hearing the voice? Do they line up? Do they look like they kind of go together? Let me go and check a setting over here really quick and see. Definitely jump in the chat. Let me know what you're seeing and what you're hearing. And I do believe that it is working correct, but I just want to check. So let me know what you see and hear in the chat. And yeah, we'll move over here so I can see the chat a little better. All right, there we go. So welcome everybody. Welcome to a Sunday live stream. Let's see here, video and audio, all good. Thanks, Pat, appreciate that. Welcome everybody. Welcome to another Sunday afternoon or evening live stream, depending on where you're tuning in from. Wanted to jump on here today and chat a little bit, do a little bit of a Q&A. Any questions that you guys might have or anything that you'd like to ask, definitely pop those in the chat. Happy to answer questions or show anything that you'd like to see on the live rig or in the computer or whatever. Now that I have this set up, I think I can do both, which will be nice. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the whole Dawless thing, because that's why the clickbaity title that I put out there. But I do want to talk about this because I've been hearing a whole bunch of comments and commentary lately that I think are a little bit, I don't know, they kind of go against the way I think about music and think about making music. So I wanted to, chat a little bit about what is Dawless and why is it a thing and why are people making such a big deal about it all the time. And let everybody know as well, there is, it's still possible to sign up for my courses. If you're interested in that, just check down below in the comment section, in the video description, and there's a link to the courses. It's circlelive.com/courses, and it will, it'll take you right to the thing where you can see which courses are available and any of that stuff. So definitely go sign up if you're interested. If you're interested in learning about hardware live performance, improvisation in live performance, using live performance in production, all of that stuff. So the courses are for all of those things. Looks like I have one setting that's a little odd. So the video may be a bit jolty. So let me just check this really quick and see if I can make a change here. Video. Let's see. It looks like it's already all set up the way we want it to. All right, looks like it's like that. Let me know how it's looking and how it's sounding. And when I jump over to the live setup, we can go into that one. Actually, I'll switch over there now so we can give it a try. Take a look at how this looks. Let me know in the chat how you see. I know there were some problems syncing this camera with the voice, so I want to see if that's an actual thing or if it's looking weird. But yeah, let me know what you're seeing, and then if you can hear things like the audio that should be coming out right now. Should be getting, let's see. Yeah, it looks like we're getting the correct amount of audio, but yeah, just let me know what you're seeing and hearing. There's a bit of a delay on the video, it says. Is that delay with this camera that I'm looking at here, or is it a delay on the main screen when we're doing it there? Sounds, it looks good. Okay. Well, let's see. Anyway, hopefully you can hear the audio coming through. Should be just a kick drum and those things coming in. Definitely let me know in the chat once you jump in where you're viewing from or where you're tuning in from. I see Ruffian in there. How's it going? I think he is from Rotterdam, if I'm not wrong. James, Seattle. Luca. Oh, the delay was on the main screen. That's interesting. All right. Well, yeah, the last time I did it, the delay was on this camera, and now the delay's over there. So we'll see. We'll do the best we can, as long as you can kind of see and hear what we're doing, and the chat makes sense, and what we're talking about makes sense. That's great. So I'll stick to this one for a little while, and then we'll see. Let's see. Luca from Helsinki, Finland. Awesome. Welcome, welcome. Eric from Southern California. Ruffian, Rotterdam. Yep. Knew that. I didn't know if you were in Rotterdam. Didn't you guys have a show last night, or did you not? You weren't part of that show that Lucian did last night. I'm not sure. Anyway, good to see you all. Definitely let me know where you're tuning in from. It's always fun to see that these little streams make it all around the world. But yeah, I think today the big thing I wanted to talk about was the whole idea of Dawless, and what is Dawless, and why is that a thing? Hey Paul, what's going on? Dawless has become such a weird thing that it's become a really polarizing thing, which I don't think it should be. I think that as I wrote in the description of this video, I have a problem with that. I don't think that we should be finding ways to divide us up and make things, this camp versus that camp, and this genre versus that genre, and this style of making music versus that style of making music. It's, we should be looking at ways that we can kind of pull everything together. And I know that for myself personally, I love to perform live with hardware. I don't use a computer when I perform, but that's kind of a personal preference thing. I have plenty of friends of mine who are live performers that play out a lot, that are using computers in their live setups, and that's great. I love to use a computer when I am producing, and I love to use a combination of hardware and software together to produce. I think you kind of get the best of both worlds that way. And I guess the way I look at it is, why wouldn't you use things for the best that you can, right? There's certain things that hardware is much better at. There's also things that software and computers and DAWs are much better at. So why wouldn't you try to take advantage of both to find the best workflow for you, make the best music that you can possibly make in the way that's the most fun for you? And if that involves using a computer, great. And if that doesn't, and you want to stay away from a computer because maybe you're on a computer all the time with your day work, then that's great too. Use whatever works for you. And don't get too hung up on this whole idea of DAWless versus DAW. Using a computer, for example, when you perform live, as far as I'm concerned, is use it for the best advantage that you can. The people that I know that use a computer and use a DAW when they're performing, most of that is used for mixing. So they're just basically saving the space of a mixing board in their live setup, or as an external mixer or whatever, and they're just sending out signals so that they can have the mixing and a little bit of signal processing in the computer, but they're still making all the music on the live hardware in the performance. So you're basically, you're using it for what it has as a strength. You can keep the size of your live performance rig smaller. You can end up with making music that, may sound better in the long run for the audience that's listening to it, because you're able to put out something at the end that sounds the way you want it to sound, the way you're envisioning it for the audience. And so you can kind of use the best of whatever does the best. Now, there's other people that want to stay away from a computer because they're an accountant and they're on their computer all day long and they just get sick of it. Or like many of us, we spend too much time on our phones and our computers anyway, so it's fun to actually deal with something that's not that. But I don't see anything wrong with the other side of this, with the people that want to just use everything, every tool they have at their disposal in order to make the best music that they can possibly make. And and again, maybe I misspoke there. It's not even about making the best music. It's about making music in a way that's the best for you. So it's the most fun. It's the most enjoyable. And some people really enjoy the hardware side of things and the tinkering and connecting wires and making something, finding a connection and problem solving when something goes wrong and fixing a thing and coming up with a solution with different modules. For some people, that's a ton of fun. For other people, they don't like that part of it. So they want to be able to do things in a way that makes sense and that uses the best tool available to them. So if doing some of those things gets in the way of making music, then why wouldn't you take those things out of your way? So really, I think that there's, use whatever tools are available to you in any way that you want to use, and don't get too caught up in the idea of it has to be a certain way. It has to be live. It has to be this. It has to be, it doesn't really matter the gear that you use. So for example, playing live and using a computer as a mixer, for example, you're still playing live. You're still playing all of your instruments. You're still doing all of the sound design. You still maybe have your patterns in your machines. You still have your songs that you've written, and maybe you're just using the computer to mix, or maybe you're using the computer for one particular task. So for me, that computer isn't taking the place. Now, obviously, there's a lot of different shades of gray in this whole idea of what is live performance. Like, it kind of makes me chuckle every time I see a flyer for a DJ and it says, XYZ DJ live, Circo live, but it's not live. It's like that they're live DJing. I guess that is as opposed to playing a pre-recorded set. I guess I don't know necessarily what that means, live, playing like live as a DJ. Now, between that, like between DJing, which I've done for 30 plus years, all the way to the other side of kind of the way I perform now, which is I don't use a computer, I don't prepare everything in advance, I do everything completely improvised from scratch. I think in between there's all different shades of gray, and I think to call any one of those right or wrong is it's limiting. For me, that's a little bit too kind of, looking down the nose at, like, oh, you don't do it this way. Well, then you're not quite pure. And I just don't see it that way. And I just want to get that out there because I hear this a lot from a lot of people. Now, again, with all those different shades of gray that there are in the middle, there's on one side of it, there's DJing, and you're playing, and I would say even farther than DJing, there's a DJ who's playing a pre-recorded set. That's the least live version. There's a human standing there, but they aren't necessarily doing anything at all, like zero. Then you get at the other side where you've got somebody who's doing everything. Like, they're playing keys, they're improvising, on drum pads, they are sequencing live, they're doing sound design live, they're, playing live instruments as part of their set. That's the other side. In the middle, you have all different things. So for example, you've got the pre-recorded set DJ, you've got the DJ who's playing a pre-planned set, then you've got the DJ who's playing from a crate, and so they're deciding what they want to play in the moment. They're reading the crowd, and they're using that selecting skill to play the right song at the right moment for that crowd. Then you have DJs who will play only their own productions. So everything they're playing is something that they made themselves, and they're not playing anyone else's music. Then you have DJs who are DJing, but they're integrating some hardware into a hybrid setup. So they may be playing on CDJs, but maybe they have a drum machine that they're using as well, which is where a lot of house and techno came from. Playing disco records on vinyl and then mixing an 808 or a 909 with that in order to make it a more modern version of whatever that original track was. And then you get into software. Then it's like, okay, DJing on Ableton, which, it is called Ableton Live because it was originally a live performance software for DJing live, meaning that in the clip view, you would drag in a whole track into every single clip. You would assign it either to crossfader side A or crossfader side B, and then you would have a controller that had a crossfader, and you would launch song A, and then when it was getting towards the end, you would launch song B, and they would launch in time, and you would just fade across, and then you would launch back across. And so that was kind of the most basic version of using Ableton to DJ. Then Ableton became much more of a production software, and it was something that people were using a lot more, and it's become over the years, kind of one of the, 5 probably biggest industry standard DAWs out there. And so now a lot of people are using that to make their productions, and they're then using that in part of their live performance. So maybe they're producing whole tracks, and then they're downloading those stems into an Octatrack, and then they're just muting and unmuting and reassembling the stems from a software production that they made in the box. And I guess in the Dawless world, that person is performing Dawless, even though they're not making any of the music in the moment. They've just taken a production that they've done in the box, exported it into a piece of hardware, and then they're using that piece of hardware to just reassemble something that they made already in the box. So is that Dawless or is that not Dawless? Then you have the next shade of gray, which is the people who will use samplers and things like an Octatrack or an MPC or whatever, and they're reassembling most of those stems of a track, and maybe they're improvising one instrument or a drum machine over the top of it. So it's a little more live and a little less produced. Then you have the next version, which is somebody who is maybe they're not doing anything in the box, maybe they're not doing anything in a DAW, but they're pre-producing every single track that they're going to play. They're pre-producing their set from A to Z, just like a pre-recorded DJ set. And it's to the point where they could basically just press play on a hardware box or whatever, a sequencer, and it would just play for them. So they're not really playing any of that themselves either, even though it's all hardware. Is that less live than somebody who's using a computer but performing everything live? Then you have the next version, which is those people who are taking bits and pieces and they're rearranging them, they're remixing live, they're doing different types of transitions, but they're doing that all with pre-produced things that they have as patterns saved in their hardware boxes. But maybe they're using a computer as the mixer, or maybe they're using the computer as their end of chain processing before it goes out, or whatever. Or maybe that computer has a few of those loops and samples in it that they produced in a track, and they're playing it from the computer instead of just loading it into an Octatrack and playing it from there. But in effect, they're doing exactly the same thing. They're pressing play on a computer versus pressing play on a sampler to play an entirely pre-made piece of the piece of music, not necessarily the whole thing, but a part of it. And then you move on to somebody who is, like for example, my friend Travarsi and Alex 106, when they play together, they use all modular setups and hardware. They're performing every single thing live that they're playing, but they're also using a laptop with Bitwig in it to act as their mixer. So they don't have to have a mixer in their case, so they can mix in that. And they're performing everything live, improvising live on the fly with all of their sound design, with all of their hardware boxes, all of that stuff, with no pre-prepared tracks. And they're just using that to mix. So is that less live just because there's a computer there? So I guess my point is, all of these things are different ways they're all different tools to use. And I think for me, the whole term Dawless has become kind of a hipster term, and it just means like, oh, you're Dawless. So you're It's kind of like saying I only drink IPAs. It's your hipster thing for no particular reason other than to say this is what I do better than you. And I just think I'm all about use whatever you have. I personally don't choose to use a laptop in my live performances because for me it's a hassle. I don't want to have to bring that with me. But for some people, it helps them avoid the hassle of bringing extra pieces of gear or, the extra connections or things like that. I have another friend of mine who basically all of his live sets, all of his tracks are prepared in Ableton. Ableton is doing all of the sequencing of his modular instead of having a sequencer like the Oxy or the Hapax or whatever. It's doing all of the sequencing into his modular case. He's using the Endorphins shuttle control to get all of that into his case, and then everything that he's doing in his case is all live in the moment. He's tweaking all the sounds, he's doing all the sound design, he's doing all of that stuff in the case, and then it goes back out to be mixed in the laptop. So again, which is the pure way to do it, which is the Dawless way. I think that's something that comes down to each individual person and each individual setup. And I think that it should really be up to you what you do, and not necessarily up to somebody, up to meeting somebody's purity standard of being Dawless or not being Dawless. So it looks like I am having some issues. Let me know in the chat if you're able to see and hear what I'm doing, because it does look like things are freezing up a bit. Let me mess with this quickly. Check with this. I think things may be slightly frozen, but let me try to get this back the way we want it. All right. Looks like we are having some issues. This may just be my computer. Let me try to close down a couple of things and see. Yeah, looks like it's getting some delay. Sorry, I'm going to close down a couple things and see if this helps. Sorry about the technical issues here. I need a stronger computer. We'll see about, maybe I can get one for Christmas. But I believe that we're better now. Looks like things should be back up and running. So again, let me know if you are able to hear me a little bit better. It looks like the live stream is kind of back up and running the way that it should be. All right, let's take a look here. All right, seems like we're back. Yeah, so let's take a look in the chat and see what you guys have to say. I'm sure you guys have plenty to say after something like this. Let's see here. Leverage everything for whatever you're doing at the time. I totally agree. That is the way I view all of this. You're right. However, I think playing a song in Ableton is exactly like playing a CDJ. Yeah, I mean, it can be if that's the way you're using Ableton. But the same could be said for playing a track off of an octatrack that is just basically 8 stems that you just hit play. They all sync, and you just turn up the volume and mute and unmute different different tracks within the octatrack, and then that has nothing to do with Ableton, but it's basically just like playing a CDJ. I'd rather see the performer perform. Me too. I guess my point is I'd rather see the performer perform no matter what gear they're using. And I'm not willing to discount them just because they have a DAW as part of their setup. I think that there are ways to use that which can be extremely artistic. Seeing Ableton performers perform on the computer and not just playing with, you know, seeing Camille Damen play when we did our show together in Amsterdam. He plays great, and he's using pretty much exclusively Ableton, but it sounds great, and it's a live set, and I love it. For me, hardware works fine. However, I started on a laptop Ableton, and it's cool too, as long as it works for you. Whatever you use is good. No need to be fundamentalist on this. I totally agree. And that's exactly where I'm at. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this, because I hear a lot of this, and it's just something that always kind of makes me chuckle a little bit. It always kind of makes me laugh that people are, you know, oh, it has to be this way or it has to be this way. And I'm like, no, it just has to be fun. Like, this is music. This is art. Make your art. That's like saying that somebody paints with oil is not as legit as somebody who paints with watercolors. And that's not as legit as somebody who, you know, grinds up leaves and makes a paint that they then paint with. Like the tool is not what makes the art. The artist makes the art. So I think being able to feature that is really important no matter what. Let's see, James, coming from Modular, I saw the vid from X106 a little over a year ago where you integrated the DAW into their setup, and after that, I thought, hell must be okay if the WMD person is using it. Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. Speaking of the WMD person, I have in my, here I can show you on this other view here, in my studio case over here, you might not be able to see it because it's a little bit down farther. I have the Mark II of the WMD Performance Mixer, which I'm doing beta testing for them. And one of the things that the Performance Mixer has is it has MIDI capability. So you can connect it to a computer so that you can record in your fader movements while you're performing as automation, which is an amazing way to integrate hardware and software. And I think just that whole idea of integrating hardware and software is just a way to make better music. And I think it doesn't, you know, I think by getting too stuck in this idea of only Dawless, it's kind of like, you know, back in the day when people said, oh, well, you can't use a drum machine to make music because that's not a real drummer. Well, we all use drum machines, and we're calling that the pure thing now. You know, saying, oh, you can't use, you know, a digital synthesizer because that's not pure enough. You can't use, you know, Ableton. You have to use Pro Tools because that's not pure enough. You can't. So it's like there just always seems to be some sort of cranky old man version of the purity test where it's like, well, back in my day, we had to use the thing and walk uphill to school both ways. It's like it just sounds like a cranky old get off my lawn person, I think, when you just start to say, no, you have to do it this way. And it's like, I don't know, you know, like for example, is a push 3 a DAW? I mean, I would say yes, it absolutely is, because it is Ableton. It is Ableton in a hardware box. But you know what else is Ableton in a hardware box? This. It's Ableton inside a computer, which is a hardware box. And in effect, all of these machines are computer anyway. So it just depends on the format. And it's like you camouflage it with a case and some knobs and say, oh, this is not a computer, but this is a computer. Oh, it's not a DAW because it's freestanding. You know, is an MPC Live a DAW? Yeah, absolutely. Is a Machina Plus a DAW? Yes, 100%. You know, just like Ableton is. But the Dawless kind of purity test says, oh, well, it's not something that you can do anything else with, so that makes it okay. But the reality is that it's still exactly the same thing. So, you know, I'm not a big fan of people checking their email during a performance, but if you're not doing that and you choose to use the processing power of a computer to mix your live set, more power to you. That's awesome. Do that. It's amazing. And use every tool you can to make things the best way that you can make them for you, for your performance. Let's see here. Yeah, looks like we're still doing okay with the glitches now, I think. Let me know if something goes weird again. Let's see here. Using Ableton for dynamics and effects with hardware. Yes, totally great use for it. Some element of improvisational danger makes it interesting to me no matter what gear is used. 100%. Totally agree with you. Yeah, delay, glitchy. Sorry, we missed all those. Chet, good to see you. Thank you for these streams. You're welcome. I'm glad to do them. I enjoy them myself. That paint metaphor I was using on the subject, yeah, and it can be anything. Like, there's a really funny one that I saw recently that said that I wanted to produce music, but I was using a computer and that was cheating. So then I started using a drum machine, but that was cheating. So then I started using regular drums, but that was cheating. So then I started making my own drums, but that was cheating. So then I started making my own goat skins for the skin on the top of the drum, but then that was cheating. So then I started raising my own goats in order to make my drums, in order to make my music, but I haven't been making much music lately because I've been too busy raising goats. And that whole line for me has been an overarching theme of how I feel about all this. Like, if the end result is to have a good time making music and the end result is to perform in a way that makes an audience have a great time and enjoy your performance, that for me, it should not make any difference what gear you're using. If you're using a computer and controllers, I don't know if you saw the store event that Jacko played, but she was using a laptop and 6 Akai MIDI controllers. That was her entire setup for store, right? Then there's other people that are playing keys live, that are sequencing on drum machines live, that are, you know, playing modular, that are doing all that stuff. But the point is that it didn't matter. All that mattered was that the music that they were making was amazing. And that, for me, should be the only way to do it, is make something that sounds good. And like you guys have heard me say before, there's no rules in techno. The only rule is it has to sound good. And it doesn't even have to sound good to everybody. If it sounds good to you and you're making it and you're having a good time making it, well, you know what? That's perfect. It is perfect music at that point. And it doesn't matter what you're using. So the whole idea of gear elitism and saying it has to be Dawless and it has to whatever, it just doesn't fly with me. You know, I'm happy enough to play Dawless because that's the way I choose to play. I came at this whole live hardware thing after having been a DJ for 35 years, and I did it intentionally to move as far away from DJing as I could because I really loved the idea of making music live in front of a crowd. And so that's why I don't pre-prepare my sets at all. Because again, for me, I didn't want to pre-prepare tracks that I built in a studio and made to be perfect in the way that they were so that I could just go and reassemble them in front of a crowd. Because playing pre-prepared music, I love the art of making music. I get a lot of pleasure in making music, in the process of making music. And I wanted to share that creative process live with the crowd. So that's why I play the way that I do. But again, that's no knock on anybody who plays any other way. I think everybody has a different motivation for why they play music. Everybody has a different motivation for why they're an artist, for why they perform. And there's no drawback in my mind. I don't look down on anyone in my mind for doing it differently any more than I would say, oh, you only use hardware boxes, you don't use modular. You know, you're not doing it the right way. Or, oh, you only use, you only use a cheap hardware groove box. You don't use the most expensive, fanciest one. Like for me, it feels the same. And so for me, you know, if the tools you have available to you are a piece of hardware and a laptop with a DAW, use that. If it's just a laptop and a DAW and maybe a MIDI controller so you can have some fun playing it, we'll do that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I don't feel like I said at the beginning of this little rant here, I don't feel like we should be dividing each other up and splitting everybody into camps based on some purity test of whether or not you have a computer in your setup that looks like a computer, or just a computer in your setup that looks like a hardware box but is also a computer, or even more so with, you know, a push 3 where it actually is a computer doing all of that stuff. So honestly, everything's good. I mean, I've seen people recently, I don't know if you guys have seen David Castellani play recently, but he plays like acoustic instruments and didgeridoo and stuff like that during his live sets. Awesome. Do everything you want to do. Some people are really good keyboard players, so they play keys live during their set. I am an awful keyboard player, so I don't play keys live during my set. When I have to do something melodically, I tend to do it outside of my improvised stuff. But let's see here. Oh, looks like we're getting weird bit rate issues again. Let me take a look at this and see if I can fix it. Oh, my bit rate is too high according to this. Let's see if I can make some adjustments real quick before I lose everybody off the stream. Come on, settings. Stream. There we go. Let's do. Let's see what that looks like. Hopefully that should change it. It should like the bit rate just a little bit more now. So yeah, so I'll come back over here and we can chat more about this. Let's see what's going on in the chat. I see video left the chat, but hopefully by the time you're hearing what I'm saying right now, it will be back. It looks like, according to my streaming software, it looks like it is back. I do believe. Let's come back over to the desk stream view and see if this helps any more. See if this does us any better. Maybe it was using too many softwares to try and get everything together. Yeah. Buffering. Right. All right, so let's take a look at the chat here. Feel free to pop into the chat with whatever questions or anything you have. Let's see here. MIDI in Euromixer is great with external sequencers. Yes, I totally agree. You can't have your case pre-patched or else it's not live. Yeah, that's Mark Verbose style. I watched him do a show in Berlin a couple years ago, and he comes out with like a whole bunch of patch cables around his neck and starts live patching on the fly, putting everything together. But you got to know your gear pretty well to do that. But it was definitely the purest form of modular. So it was pretty funny. Let's see here. What else? You need to carve a drum from a tree trunk. Totally. The goats seem legit. Yeah, if you've got time to raise goats and make drums and use that to make your music. Stylophone okay. Everything's okay. That's the whole point of what we're talking about here. It's all okay. Let's see. Video left the chat. Yeah, I understand that. It's hopefully back now. Feels like it's back now. Let's see. With the Oxy One, can you have different BPM tempo per track? And also adjust it while the track is playing. I don't know because I've never used it like that before. You can have different track lengths, but I don't know about BPM. And I know you can have different divisions of the clock by track, but I'm not certain that you could have different BPM. So like, for example, you could have one track that's playing in, at double time or half time or whatever compared with the main tempo. But I'm not sure about individual tempos. But yeah, because that's not something that I ever do in my setup, so I've never really looked into that. Let's see here. I just can't wrap my head around live performance inside a traditional DAW. I've been watching your stuff for a while and definitely want to purchase some kind of hardware, but not sure where to start. Yeah, it's within a traditional DAW, like it would have to be with something like Ableton Live, which was really set up to be a live performance tool, where if you use the clip view, that's really designed to be able to put things together, have parts of your song set up so that you can move from one part to the next and kind of disassemble and reassemble and all of that stuff. And it was really kind of designed for that. So if that's something that you're interested in, you could definitely do that in Ableton. As far as getting a piece of hardware, but not sure where to start, that's a tough question because I think a lot of that comes down to what kind of music you want to make, how you want to make it. Do you want to, are you making house? Are you making techno? Are you making drum and bass? Are you making hip hop? Whatever that is will influence the gear decision. What I always try to push people towards is lean into your strengths. So if you are a really good keyboard player, make your hardware be, a synth with keys that you can play live. If you are, if you want to, pre-prepare the melodic stuff and you want to sequence drums, get something that's more of a drum machine that you can improvise on live, like, Jeff Mills style. But it really just comes down to whatever is your strength is what I would recommend you kind of lean into from a hardware perspective. And also, this goes for people that already have a bunch of hardware, that if you're not sure if you need something or whatever, and you're like, oh, I feel like I'm missing a piece, try to think about what you already have in your setup. Mess around with it, explore a whole bunch, and see if you can really push it to a point where you kind of learn the limits of it, and then you'll quickly learn the limits of what you have. You'll learn, if you are missing something, maybe that's something polyphonic, maybe it's something monophonic, maybe it's something for doing samples, maybe you've got all sample-based stuff and you want something that's more of a synth. So it really, there's a lot of choices to make. The only thing that I would caution if you're going to be getting a piece of hardware, as much as like a freestanding piece of hardware, I would say be wary of things that claim to be all in one, because that tends to make a workflow that's not very conducive to performance, unless you're only using part of what it can do. But to go into something that can do it all, and try to perform live in any sort of an improvised way is really, really a challenge. It's not as evident as it might seem. So I would definitely caution that. Let's see, are you going to keep all the keyboard synths? Does it make more sense to just use desktop synths inside? Yeah, I really don't have, the only keyboard synths I still have, if you look over here, I have an SH-101 because that's the only version of it that that there is that's actually kind of usable. And then over here, which you can't see, I have a Arturia Polybrute. And those are really the only keyboard synths I still have. Everything else is either desktop or definitely much more leaning towards modular or hardware boxes, for a bunch of different reasons. But again, it goes back to that thing, the advice that I give. I have to kind of follow my own advice sometime, which is which is to lean into your strengths. And like, I am not a strong keyboard player, so having a bunch of keyboards is not something that makes a lot of sense for me. Having a lot of drum machines, a lot of sequencers and things like that makes a lot more sense for me, because that's where my strength lies. I'm good at programming sequencers live and kind of playing the sequencer as the instrument rather than playing keys as the instrument. So that's kind of what I lean into with my performances. Let's see what else. Curious about your black box workflow. Struggle with sample management on it. So kind of like what I just mentioned, the black box can do a lot of things. I only do a very limited number of things with it. It fills a very specific space in my live setup, which is it plays, I have everything in the kind of clip mode where it's a longer time stretched sample that loops. And I only use things that can loop, and it's only for things that I record in advance that are part of the performance that can just be kind of faded in and faded out. And I use the Launch Control XL to control it. And so that way I have fader control over volume, and I also have a pitch, or sometimes I do a DJ style filter on those. But it can sequence. I'm not sequencing on it. It can do effects. I'm not doing any effects on it. You could basically play a whole live set just on a black box. But for me, it's not a workflow that's a lot of fun for live, because you're like in a screen and you're going through menus, and touch screens aren't super tactile and things like that. So it's just, for me, it's not something that's really conducive to live. So that's why I don't do more than what it does. Now, what it's doing, it serves a very specific purpose, because there's nothing else in my setup that can properly time stretch longer samples the way I need it to. And I used to use the Octatrack for that, but the black box does exactly the same thing in a much, much smaller package. And that's not to say the black box does the exact same thing as an Octatrack, but it serves the same purpose in my live setup that the Octatrack was serving, right? So the Octatrack was playing longer time stretched samples, and it was doing performance effects and acting as a performance mixer. So I have a mixer in my case, I have a performance effect module in my case, and I have the black box for doing the time stretch samples. So that's what it does in my workflow. It's just playing longer time stretch samples. And I can actually show you what those are. So basically, I have it set up so that I have, in every one of the 16 pad setups here, I have 4 subs, 4 atmospheres, 4 percussion loops, and 4 kind of hooks that I recorded using my modular in my studio, like the bigger studio modular. And in case I want to use them in performance, I can. So just as an example, if I want to sub, I can bring this up. I'm assuming you're hearing that, yeah. So I can just bring up a sub, and that's just a loop that's playing in there, because that's something that's, it's kind of, in my mind, for me personally, it's kind of a waste of time to do something like that in the hardware. I'm doing bass lines in the hardware, I'm doing leads, I'm doing drums and percussion, effects, performing, bringing different instruments in and out, mixing, all of that stuff. And having something that's like an atmosphere or a sub is kind of the last thing that I need to be spending my time on or my money on creating modules for. So like, I'll give you an example. So something like this is also coming from the black box. and that's just a background atmosphere to have in a production. So if or in a performance. So if I have that sub and that atmosphere, that can give me kind of a foundation in the background, and it's kind of a blank canvas to then perform on top of, right? So then I can go in and add in drums. Or percussion elements. Again, I have the performance stuff in the case, so the Oxymeta is my performance mixing, so my performance effects. So this is a way for me to have that kind of foundation. If I was to take those foundational elements out in the background, this is what you're left with. So just bringing in the atmosphere helps to kind of fill everything out and make it sound like more of a full track. And then having something like a sub in the background can do that as well. And then I have some percussion loops in here that I've made from the modular or I've recorded from other things. So I can bring those in instead of doing percussion here or in addition to percussion here. So like, so you can really quick build up something using improvised elements here, and then using just those loop elements that are in the black box. So that's really the way I'm using that. That's my black box workflow, is to have that be there as those kind of elements that kind of aren't worth the hassle of doing live. Kind of like some of the things that I will have in the Dig Attack for drums. So I'll have in there like an offbeat hat and an offbeat ride, just so that I can, have it to go to. There's no reason for me to improvise that because it's a standard thing that I'll just have all the time anyway. So yeah, so I can go in and mess with those things. But yeah, anyway, that's how I use the black box. So let's see here, where are we? I almost feel like starting with an external sequencer and then building sounds around it. You can use a sequencer with a DAW and then you can branch out. Yeah, for sure, that's a way to do it. I actually recommend people to do that a lot when they're thinking about getting into modular, because if you use a DAW and you use something like VCV Rack, or even just the plugins from your DAW, and you route things through that, you can figure out which like effects you want to use. So let's say you like these two different types of delays, or you like this particular type of filter. Well, then once you've figured out what you like using the cheap or free version in the DAW, then you can buy the hardware box, or then you can buy the module to make something work that way. So it's another way that using a DAW can really work to your favor in the whole kind of DAWless hardware world. So I totally agree with you, James. Thoughts on buying a secondhand without knowing the previous owner? I buy all kinds of stuff secondhand. It's, obviously you got to trust the person. I prefer, when I buy secondhand, to buy using Facebook Marketplace, because I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like people are less likely to screw you over if the sale is connected to their Facebook profile, because it means that you know who they are and you can put them on blast if they stop answering you because the thing you bought was broken or whatever. And I've had great experiences with buying and selling things on Marketplace, so that's been great for me. It's always been one of my weird things with things like eBay and even Reverb, just because you don't know the person. Often it's shipped. And so it's a lot easier for somebody to just kind of, ditch something off on you, and then you can't do anything. I had a bad experience years ago. I bought a synth through eBay, and it got there, and one of the keys was broken, and the guy was like, "Oh, well, it was fine when I sent it, so you're stuck with it." And then there's kind of almost nothing you can do about it. At least there wasn't back then. So anyway, it's you never know with stuff like that, but I'm always one to trust first unless I have a reason not to. So what would you recommend as a really good polyphonic desktop synth? I don't know. I mean, it kind of depends on how much money you have to spend. I mean, if you really want to get the something that's the bomb, get something like a Virus or Prophet or something like that. The Yeah, I don't know. As far as a desktop polyphonic, you're kind of asking the wrong person, because I am not a big polyphonic synth person. The only polyphonic synth I have is the Polybrute, and it's just because I love it for sound design, and not for the polyphony. That is not something that makes any difference to me at all. I much prefer using multiple monosynths rather than having polyphonic synths in my live performances and in my productions. So yeah, it's just I prefer working with them, working with monosynths, just because I feel like I have more control, and things don't get as cluttered in mixes when I don't use polyphonic synths. So, but yeah, I mean, if you wanna spend the money, get a Prophet. That'd be great. Let's see what else here. Just got Viper VST, and it replicates Virus TI. Sounds so well. Virus is legendary. Yeah. That's. I mean, like I said, the Virus is kind of like it's. What do they say it's like an Omnisphere in a box. Like it's like one of those just unbelievable, massive, does every possible sound. It's like having one of the best VSTs, but in a box. So yeah, it all just kind of depends. I mean, they're expensive, and so it's. A lot of it depends on what you can afford, how important it is for you to get the expensive things. Some people go for the cheaper things and they get something, they get a Behringer or something like that. It's totally up to you. But yeah, as far as polyphonic goes, I'm not the best one to ask. There's a couple that I like out there. I think Novation Peak's pretty cool, but yeah. Anyway, let's see. What do you use for subs? All kinds of stuff. It's, I think as far as making subs, it's kind of everything. And that's one of the reasons why I don't have them as part of my live setup, because for me, I use a lot of different sounds and a lot of different processing to get subs the way that I want them to be. So I'll use modular, I'll use things at the DAW, or I'll use whatever, but it's important to be able to do a bunch of processing to a signal to get the sub to sound right. Unless you're using like you can use a Moog monophonic synthesizer and get a really good sub sound and kind of filter things all the way down and still get a good sub, although they can be a little bit imprecise, I guess. It's like they kind of just fill up the low end rather than having tones and patterns and rhythms. So I like to use things that are more of a bass sound that's really saturated a lot, so it has a whole bunch of harmonics in it, so that when you filter it down, you still get a whole bunch of interesting sound, and you can still hear different things as you move filters around and stuff like that. So that's my personal preference. Let's see. How long are my atmosphere loops? I mean, it depends, and that's one of the reasons why I love the black box. Just like the Octatrack, is it doesn't matter the length of the loop. If I have an atmosphere loop that's 4 bars or 3 minutes, it doesn't make any difference. I just load it in, and it will time stretch it, and it will loop it in time. I originally was hoping that I was going to be able to do that in the Digitac 2, now that it has that stretch algorithm. But if the sample isn't exactly to the millisecond, the exact right length. As soon as you start to change the tempo, you start to get artifacts in it. So that's great if you're, it works really, really well if you're recording the sound directly into the Digitact. But if you're not, if you're pulling a sample from somewhere else or something that you recorded like a field recording or whatever, and put that in, the Digitact is not the machine for you. It's not there yet as far as the time stretching algorithm. So that's why I was using the Octatrack and I switched to the black box for that exact reason, just so that it doesn't matter how long those samples are because they're all different. Let's see. Thanks for going through it. You're welcome. Totally different question, but does anyone adjust their spectrum curve slope for referencing? I don't know. I mean, interested to hear what everybody else pops in there. $99 for Viper VST. Cool. Best bang for the buck would be a secondhand Hydrosynth. Yeah, Hydrosynth sounds good if you like that sound. And kind of like that's for me one of the big things about buying specific hardware synths is you have to absolutely be in love with its sound, because you're spending a lot of money on one particular synth. So if you are not in love with its sound, it's a lot of money to spend. And this is again another reason where it's really nice sometimes to use a hybrid setup between a DAW and Dawless. So if you have really amazing sounding VSTs, you can make loops or you can sample in one shots or whatever, and those in your live performance, and you can save thousands and thousands of dollars on hardware synths. However, if you want to play them live, then just be sure that you really love the sound of whichever one you're getting, and then it's got enough variety that you're not going to get sick of it. Hydrosynth is great, and it has a ton of variety. It does have a very particular sound. It does sound very kind of metallic, very precise in one sense. And so if that's what you're looking for, it's amazing. And but just know that going in, it doesn't sound like every other synth. It sounds like a Hydrosynth. And the same can be said for all of these. You know, like every one of these synths kind of sounds like itself, and that's part of what makes them special and unique and all that stuff. So let's see. Actually, very interested in the new Polyend synth. Seems very jammable. Yes, it looks interesting. Again, as I mentioned before, I get leery of things that do a lot in a single box with a single little screen. I feel like Electron does a really good job with their workflow for single boxes in one screen. Very few other companies do a good job with their workflow. And so, you know, like Roland synths sound amazing, but their workflow is a nightmare. So for me, it's like, it sounds good, but just be wary that if you're going to be using it for performance, particularly for any sort of improvisation in performance, just be wary of going into menus and what it takes and how many parameters you can adjust at once, because it does a lot of things, but with very few knobs to control those things. So like something like a Deluge, for example, it does it all. It does everything, but there's only like 4 knobs on it. So you can't do multiple things at once. You can't do things that are on multiple different pages at once or adjusting multiple parameters at once. So it makes it a challenge, and it's really fun for sketching and producing ideas. But for improvised performance, it's really hard to get in there and do that sound design live. So again, that's kind of why I use modular, is the ability to have everything on the face of it and be able to, you know, grab multiple parameters at the same time and adjust multiple things at once without having to go to a different menu. So it's there's always that trade-off. So before you jump in with both feet into any particular piece of gear, make sure you get along with the workflow, because no matter how good something sounds, if the workflow doesn't work for you, you're never going to use it, or you're going to struggle, or you're going to, you know, want to chuck it out the window every time you start to use it. So just be wary of that. Workflow, for me at least, is more important than sound every single time. Let's see, which VCAs are you using? In my performance setup, interestingly enough, here I'll show you. If you notice, in my performance setup, I have exactly 0 VCAs. Because again, one of the things that I do with my performance rig is I try to get as much as I can into the smallest amount of space possible in order to be able to minimize the case for when I travel so that I can take it as carry-on luggage. This is actually bigger than what I usually used to travel with. I usually use an 84 and this is a 104. So it'd be like this big. So this last bit here, I wouldn't have. But I've been doing local shows recently, so that's why I was doing it with this case. But because of that, if you notice, the modules that I've chosen are modules that don't require external VCAs. So they are more complete voices. Some of them even have filters built in. So like the Ericsson's baseline has a filter built in. The Pizza has envelope and all that stuff inside it, but it doesn't have a filter. So that's why it's over here. BIA has all of that built in except for the filter as well. Battering ram has everything internal. Archer's rig has everything internal. So yeah, so the answer is I have 0 VCAs. I guess I shouldn't say that. This mixer is analog and it's all VCA based. And so every channel has a VCA that's controlled by the slider, and it can actually be set up to be controlled in different ways depending on how you set up the mixer. So I have everything set up to act just as a normal mixer and not to be used as VCAs, but you can actually, there's CV control over volume on this mixer. And so you can actually set it up so that these are your VCAs. I just don't have it set up that way because I don't need it, because everything that I have here has the VCA built right in. So yeah, let's switch back over here so I can see the stream again. Scooped on the PE synth, and it's been pretty great for the sounds and interface. PE, oh, I'm assuming you mean polyend. I was like PE synth. Couldn't think about what that was for a second. The polyend synth, so you do like it. That's great. I haven't messed with it yet, so that's why I'm not about to give an opinion on it because I haven't messed with it. My concern just looking at it would be it seems to do a lot and doesn't have a lot of hands-on control. And that's generally where things run into difficulty. That doesn't mean they do. They may have come up with a great way to do that, which is awesome. Some companies do, and they're just really good at the whole user interface thing. And other companies are not at all. So it just comes back down to whatever you like. DSI Tetra, and I love it. Cool. Have Hydrosynth. Yep. Absolutely in love. Yeah, it's definitely, Hydrosynth is great. And I think that bang for the buck, if you like the sound that it puts out, it's an amazing value. I mean, it does a lot of what a Novation Peak does for about half the price. So it's like, it's a great deal as a versatile synth. So how do you go about extending a note length in a step sequence on the Oxy? Simple, actually. I can show you. So there's a couple different ways that you can do it. You have control over gate. So this is gate length. So if I go into the gate page here, so let's go back. So we're on this sequence right here, the second line. So it's just these 3 notes. So if I go into the gate on that, I've got those 3 notes that are this length, but if I want to make them different lengths, I can just go like that, make them different lengths, whatever length you choose to do it. So that's one way to do it. That's probably the quickest, easiest, is to just change the gate length. As long as your output is going into a gate input in your modular and not a trigger input. Which none of these will work if it's going into a trigger input. The other way that you can change it on here is, so if you do one, here, unmute this so you can see it. If you do one step, it's going to do whatever your standard gate length is that you've adjusted within the thing. But if you hold it down and you move over like that, it will show you where the step starts and then how long it holds. So if it's, it all depends on what it's going to. If it's going to something that's just being patched as a trigger input, it will only trigger at the beginning. But if it's going into something that's patched as a gate input and it has a long decay on it, it will go as long as this is. So you can make this extend way out, or you can make it shorter. You know, you can do all kinds of stuff with these. So that's the two simple ways to change length. One is gate length, and then the other one is actually, you can put it into the sequence itself. Do it that way. Let's see. Yeah, I find it difficult to do improvisation on my MC707. Yeah. Still love the workflow, but it makes me think it would be better getting a performance mixer instead of trying to improvise live. Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I had an MC707 for a while, because again, it sounds really good. Those Roland sound engines are awesome. But the layout of it is interesting from a playability standpoint, kind of like a TR8 or TR8S. It's nice to have faders. It's nice to have stuff that you can actually control. The problem with Roland stuff in general for me is, at least any of the modern Roland stuff, is that it does so much and they make their screens so small that there's no good way to do the workflow when you've done something like that. So you either need to, like, if you have a small screen and it doesn't do a lot of vastly different things, it's still pretty easy to make a workflow work. Or if you have something that does a ton of things and you have a bigger screen, it's easier to make things work. But when you combine that massive amounts of capabilities with a tiny little screen, it just means that you have to go menu, 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 change one parameter, come back out, go down another menu rabbit hole, change one parameter, come back out, go down another one, change one parameter. Whereas the reason why I love the workflow on Electron boxes is I think they found a happy medium between that, where it's very easy to switch between pages using the buttons that are across there. So you don't have to go deep into menus. You can just go across, and it's a hardware button you're pressing. So you can build up muscle memory for where things are. And then once you go in, there's, here, I should probably show this instead of just talking about it. So like the hardware buttons that are across the bottom here, it's really easy to go synth, filter, amp, effects, trigger, whatever page you want to be on. It's really easy to get to that page. And then once you're on the page, you have 8 parameters and there's 8 knobs and they line up. So this is the first parameter, this is the second, this is the third, this is the fourth. So they've done a really good job of packing a lot of stuff into a limited workflow space, rather than having something like what the MC707 or the Deluge has, where you've only got one control knob, basically, or in some cases 2 or whatever. But so you have to change to a different parameter, then you can control it. Then you change to a different parameter and you can control it with the same knob. So you can't do multiple things at once. Where here, you've got 8 that you can potentially do at once. I know you don't have 8 hands, but there's times when I'm gonna lower a whole bunch of things on a mixer and I'll like put my hand across and I can roll 4 knobs at once. So it is much more, it's much more of a streamlined workflow as far as a way to integrate hardware controls with software that's really in depth. You know, that's the hardest part about it, I think. So, let's see, what else? Is it only me who has perfect audio but slideshow video? Yeah, sorry, I have a computer that is struggling, and the reason why it's doing it this way, other than how it is normally on these streams, is because I'm using OBS, where I wasn't using that before. I was just using a regular streaming software, and OBS is taking processing power along with my computer itself taking processing power. Let me see if I quit a couple of other things from here. This should help us. We're gonna get this to work. Definitely gonna get it to work. There we go. Let's see what this does. So yeah, workflow for me is key, and it's one of those things that's really a challenge to get right for a lot of these companies. So yeah, what other questions you guys have? Chuck them in the chat. It's a nice opportunity to do a ask me anything kind of chat. So if there's anything you want to chat about or ask about, whether it's hardware, software, courses, I don't know, life in general, travel, food. I'm in the restaurant biz, so happy to talk food too. Whatever you guys would like to talk about, just chuck it into the chat. And if there's anything you'd like me to show you on my live rig, happy to do that as well. So let's see here. How's the audio looking now? It seems to be going in the right way when I'm looking at my preview screen over here in YouTube Studio Live. See what this looks like. Anyway, let's head back over to the bench here. So again, yeah, workflow wise, I think that there's always this sort of trade-off that companies do with workflow. So you take something like modular, for example. This is the example of kind of the ultimate knob per function. Like there's not really any screens to dive into with the exception of the pans, which is I never used anyway. I never used the screen part. So this way, everything, you don't even have to go into a menu to do everything. So this is one extreme. Then you've got something like the black box, which has really limited knobs and controls. So in order to do anything, you have to, let's say, control over to a certain page, then go to info, then go to info again, then you can switch to this side, then you can control this one, then you can go back, and then you so you're constantly going in and out of things. And so that's one of the reasons why I use it the way I do. And I don't use all the functionality of it, because if I was to use all those functions, I would be constantly focused on this thing. And my live setup would look like this. I would just be like head down, just in the box all the time. So I try to avoid that. And that's one of the reasons why I love using the modular. And also, like I said, the electron boxes. So to be able to really quickly, so if I'm messing with a sound in here, so I can just go to the track I want to go to, and then I have the trigger functions, the synth functions, the filter functions, the amp functions, and the effects functions. And so like if I want to go to effects, I just hit effects, I'm on that page, then I have bit reduction, overdrive, sample rate reduction, delay, reverb, chorus, and then I can adjust pre-filter and post-filter all on one screen without going into another menu, without diving any deeper. I just have everything right here with controls that coordinate with those. And again, as simple as this sounds, having the controls line up with what's on the screen is a huge deal. I don't know if you've ever used the MPC Live, but when I had one to try out, the thing that drove me crazy with it is you have 4 knobs on the right side of the screen to control things that are on the screen. And I'm not a big fan of using touchscreens in live performance because your hands are sweaty and it's dark and you need to kind of fumble around for things. So being able to use the knobs is important. And on the MPC, you've got 4 knobs on the right. And sometimes the parameters of those 4 knobs are right next to them on the screen, but sometimes they're across the bottom. And it's like, okay, well, wait a minute, it's knob 2, wait, no, it's knob 3 because it's parameter 3. So you have to kind of like stop your live performance in your head to be able to make it work within the software that it's using. So it's just a nightmare. So as far as like the live performance side of it. Now, and please take with a grain of salt, everything that I say is my own personal experience. I'm not saying that gear is awful. I'm saying for my workflow, it's awful. It doesn't work the way my brain works. And so being able to have gear that works the way my brain works is really important because there's enough stress to a fully improvised live set without having to have the additional stress of trying to constantly figure out how to use your gear because it's not laid out in a way that is clear to your brain. So you're like constantly fumbling around and which page am I on? And wait, no, I need to go over to this menu. And it, like, for me, that's just the kiss of death for a piece of gear. I don't care how good it sounds. If the workflow is like that, it's dead to me. I just can't use it. So I definitely need stuff that works the way my brain does. And I highly recommend that whenever any of you are looking for a piece of gear, thinking about what to get, deciding for, hardware, software, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Whenever you're thinking about that stuff, place workflow above everything else. Because it doesn't matter how good something sounds, if the workflow is such a pain in the ass that you never use it, you'll never get that sound. So for sure, make sure that the workflow works for you the way your brain works. And if it does, then go with it. You can make the sounds work. Like you can make the rest of it work, but workflow above all else. Let's see here. Good stream. Thanks. Appreciate that. Also, for anybody who came in late, pop into the stream where you're from. Because it's like the highlight of my week when I do these streams, when I see where everybody's from. Because like I'm in my basement of my house in Colorado. So it's so interesting to hear where this is. So where you're seeing this from, and for me to say like, oh, you're at this place, you're in whatever. So let's see, any good pizza places in Denver? Yeah, there's a lot of good pizza places in Denver. I don't know, let me think about that for a second. I haven't had pizza out in Denver for a while, but I'll think about that, hold on. I'm curious about that other larger modular rig you got there and what you use it for. So that other larger modular rig, I'll switch views here so you can see. The other larger modular rig is this right here, which I can tip this down so you can see from a weird, super weird angle. Yeah, so this is my studio rig, which I actually don't even have switched on right now. Here, I'll turn it on and make everything look flashy and fancy and blinky. What this is it serves two purposes for me. The whole reason why I set this up is because I had a whole bunch of modules that I wasn't using. They were just kind of sitting on a shelf, and I would kind of swap them into my live rig sometimes and swap them out of my live rig. And I wanted to have a place, first and foremost, to store them that was usable. So for me, this serves the dual purpose of being kind of a library of my modules that sometimes go in my live case and sometimes don't. And it's also what its main use is there was a lot of modules that I wanted to buy that were that I love the sound of, or for a specific purpose or something like that, that didn't necessarily fit with my live rig. So maybe they were too big. They took up too much space in my case, so I just couldn't afford the space. Or maybe, like for example, I have the Chaos Devices Odessa in my larger case. And the Odessa, I absolutely love the sound of it. I absolutely love the things that it can do, the noises it can make, right? I think it's an amazing, creative, clever, unique sounding module. But to get to those good sounding sounds, it can take 15 or 20 minutes to dial a sound into where it sounds really good. And playing live, I just don't have the time to do that. Performing live, improvised. So what I do is I have it in my studio case, and I will use this case to I can write patterns with that. I can come up with things that I can use that sound for, and then I can record those loops and I can load them in the black box. So I can still get the advantage of that sound, but not have to carry it with me in my case. So this has become, this case has become something that I use for production and something that I use for sound design. And I use it as well for my live performance stuff, but only in the context of I sample things from it that I can then take with me either as one shots in the Digitact or as looped samples in the black box. So really, that's kind of what all of that is for. And really everything else. Like I have some other modules in here, you know, like some of these effects modules are wonderful effects, but I just didn't have space for them in my other case. I have a lot of things that have been at one point in my live case. So like the Oxycoral is here, the Black Wave Table VCO from Erica Synths is here, the Beehive, which is a Platts clone, is here. And those are ones that were in my case at one point or another, but I swapped out for something else just because of a sound that I was looking for in my case. So I just moved those over here. And then I've got other ones that, again, like I said, they're too big. Like the Odessa is too big and takes too long to dial in. I have a DPO for Make Noise, which is also a really big module and takes a lot to get it to sound exactly the way you want. Amazing for sound design and for production when you want to just explore and tweak and find that cool thing. And then once you get it dialed in, then you record it. That's amazing for this case. But in the context of a live performance, there's just not time to do that when you're playing live. So yeah, so it doesn't make it in the case. And also, as I noted before, I don't have VCAs. I don't have really any modulation at all in this case because my whole live set is really built around the idea of I am the modulation, right? So I perform everything live into the case or into the live set instead of having, you know, automated modulation that's changing things up for me while I play. So there's really no modulation in the case at all. I have a few things, very minor things that are coming out of the PAMs. But again, there's not really much modulation in here on purpose because I like to be the modulation myself. Whereas in this case, I have all sorts of modulation sources and all sorts of ways to do it. Like the whole middle row is like, it's Batumi and Lapsus and Tangrams and Maths and a dope for quad LFO and a quartz quad LFO and another PAMS and a 410. So it's like all of these things that are really cool for modulation that take up, you know, a whole row in the case, which I don't have the space for in my travel case. So I have that there. Now, that said, I'm going to be getting a new case coming up in the next couple weeks. They said they were going to ship it before Christmas, so we'll see. So I'm going to be going from a 6U84, which is what I was normally traveling with, to a 12U84. It'll be a folding case that's double the size. So my plan is to make the lower half the same as what my 6U84 was before. So it can be its own standalone unit that I can take. If I only want to take one half of the case, I can just take the lower part and that can be enough for me to play my live sets with my hardware boxes. The second half of it, the upper part of the case, is going to be more modules like what's in my, I'm going to move some of the modules from my studio case so that I have some things that are more complex voices and things that I may not use as often, but that they're really super interesting, and it allows me to have them with me when I have the ability to take a larger case, depending on where I'm traveling for shows. So that will be interesting when I go to the 12U84. I haven't used a case that big for performance. So I'm in Modular Grid all the time now, trying to figure out how I want it to look. So I have some ideas, but we'll see. So what else? Luckily it doesn't fit my music. Montreal, nice, beautiful city. I love Montreal. I have spent quite a bit of time there. Western Mass, cool. I'm a New Englander too, so it's like this whole Eastern Canada, Massachusetts thing. It's my old stomping grounds. Markham, Canada. Where's that? Where's Markham? What is that near? I'm not familiar. Chicago, sweet. Welcome from Chicago. Sofia, Bulgaria, and Paris, France. Damn, you're all over the place. Where are you right now? Are you in Paris or are you in Sofia? Either way, cool to have you join us. Thank you very much for joining in all the way from over there. Kassel, Germany. Awesome. Love it. Los Angeles, very cool. Hope I'll be in LA next month for NAM slash Buchla and Friends. So I will be out there. I think I'm performing, but I'm not sure. I heard that I am, but I'm not sure yet. So I'll let you know. If I am, I'll pop it into one of these events and let you know. Houston, Texas. Awesome, awesome. Sick. I think the sick was probably to the modular case over here. But yeah, so this is my whole huge kind of table of you know, I've gotten rid of a bunch of my hardware since lately because everything has really become much more and more focused on this side, on doing things with live and modular. Because for me, there's just so much more flexibility with this, and I just enjoy it more. So that's why I end up doing this stuff. So yeah. What else? Any other questions? Pop those into the chat. Again, happy to check this out. See, everything still appears to be going the way it's supposed to be going. Yeah, happy to chat about anything. A really quick plug, the only sponsor I have of these videos is me. So I will put out there that if you're interested in taking any of my courses, they're all available online at circlelive.com/courses. There's a link in the description of the video, so you can pop in and check those out. And I have an improvised live performance full workshop that includes live video course, or online course, plus video, plus feedback on videos of your live performance, plus one-on-one lessons via Zoom, a whole bunch of that stuff. And then I also just started the first cohort of a hybrid production course, which is talking about how to use live performance setup in production, specifically in the DAW. So that goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this about, you know, DAW versus Dawless. Like there's definitely a place for both. And in that course, we talk a lot about how to use your DAW to complement your live performance. So making loops and samples that you can use in something like a black box or an Octatrack. How you can use your performance rig in your Dawless, like multi-tracking in live performances that you're doing, so that you can then have all of the pieces and parts of those live performances that you can either use in production or edit and bring back into your live setup. So there's a lot of back and forth between everything, you know, between the two types of setups. And that's why for me, having a setup that's hybrid between live and, or between like a hardware live setup and a setup that uses a DAW, I think gets the best of both worlds. So it allows you to do some pretty amazing stuff. So if you're interested in those, check them out now. You can still use the Black Friday code. I think it's 20% off right now. So if you put in Black Friday at checkout, you can get 20% off the courses. That discount is about to go away. So if you're interested, you can sign up now for the current courses that are happening and you can jump in with us still, or you can sign up for January or February courses. Those are still available now on the current discount. So you can use the discount now, but not do the course till later, if that's something you want. And you can also pay over time with Afterpay. So if you're interested in doing that, you don't have to pay for the whole thing up front. All right, let's see, where are we? Portland, Oregon, sweet. I was out there not too long ago and I hope to be out there again soon. I think I'm gonna be doing, what's the name of the party? I can't remember, a live hardware party in Portland coming up the first part of this year. So I will let you guys know as well. What's the size of your current live case? So this one right here is a 6U104. Traditionally, I use the 6U84, which is this linked. So it would be just this part of it. Taking out, actually, I'll switch to the overhead view so you can see. Basically to here. So this is 84. So it would be this size. And my new case is going to be this, but with the same on a place that raises up. So it'll have one part up above, one part down below. So it will be 12U84. So are you still using the Ableton Move at all? If so, what do you use it for? Yes, I am. It is actually right here. Here we go, the Ableton Move. I am actually using it for exactly what its intended use is. So that is for sketching out ideas that you can then move into Ableton to blow up into bigger productions. So, and I've also used it in 2 live performances since I got it. Both of those live performances, however, because of some of the implementation things with it, it's not really set up for live performance. So I was just kind of using it as a unsynced standalone synth that I could play using the pads, so that I could play some live stuff during the performance. But it's the way they did the MIDI and clock implementation with it. It's not really set up to do live performance yet. From what I hear, they're talking about fixing some of that in software update. But since that wasn't originally the intended use of the Move, they didn't really set it up that way. They wanted it to be really truly an idea starter sketchpad for Ableton, for which it is an absolutely, they did a stellar job with that task to make it a sketchpad for sketching ideas that you will use then Ableton to blow back out into complete full tracks. So yeah, it's great for that, and that's what I've been using it for. Not wonderful for a lot of other stuff. So let's see. Regis. Have you ever used anything from Teenage Engineering? Yes, I've used pretty much everything. Like, I've tried pretty much everything from Teenage Engineering except for the OPXY. I haven't tried it yet, and I want to. I'm looking forward to it. It's funny, I didn't mention this in the earlier conversation about workflow, but the Teenage Engineering devices for me are a perfect example of things that are very cool, sound good, interesting, creative, well-made, beautiful instruments. I like all of them. However, their workflow does not lend itself to my particular music creation performance needs. So because of that, that's why you never see any of their gear in my setups. That's one thing about this channel. I was talking to somebody recently about this, about YouTube channels in general, and I don't do, I don't like, people don't send me gear and say, here's a piece of gear, do a video on it, and tell everybody how amazing it is. I really don't do those videos. That's not to say that I don't get gear sometimes from companies, and I'm pretty upfront about that. But the thing is that I do it the other way around. If there's a piece of gear that I'm interested in, I will reach out to a company and say, hey, I'm interested in trying your gear, no strings attached. And if I like it, I will integrate it into my gear that I use. And as a secondary benefit of that, people will see it. I will talk about how much I like it and why I like it. If I don't like it, I will quietly send it back to you, and you will never hear me do a gear review and say like, oh, this is awesome because they paid me, or this one sucks because whatever. If I don't like something, you won't see it on the channel. And if I do like something and you see it on the channel, it's not because somebody paid me to like it. It's because I chose it, and I only really talk about the stuff that I use. I'm not going to throw out there a whole bunch of things that I just don't use and talk about those. So that said, in the couple hundred videos that I have on my YouTube channel, there's a reason why you don't see any Teenage Engineering stuff, and it's not because they didn't give it to me, they haven't paid me, they haven't whatever. It's because I tried it and I didn't like it, so I got rid of it. And again, just like everything else I've said here, the fact that I didn't like it doesn't mean that it's bad. It means that the workflow didn't work for me, for the way I needed to use it for certain things. And so because of that, it wasn't something that was worth taking up space in my live setup, or in my travel rig, or in my production brain power, or whatever. On the other hand, the Ableton Move, which I bought myself full price, I didn't get a discount on, it wasn't given to me, I really love it. and I think it's great for what it is. I think it's outstanding, and I'll continue to use it. I have other gear that, for example, when I got my first Oxy One almost 3 years ago now, I bought it used off of Reverb. I paid for it myself. I paid basically full price because you couldn't get them at that time. So even a used one was like the full new price. I used it for a while. I loved it. It showed up all the time in my videos. And the people from Oxy reached out and said, "Hey, thanks for talking about our gear so much. We're happy that so many people are seeing it." And I was like, "Well, thank you for making cool gear." Like I did that. Because of that, I started a relationship with them. Now, when I go to Super Booth, for example, I work at their booth kind of unofficially and do some demos and walk people through their gear. I do performances with them that demonstrates their gear, just because I'm a user, not because I'm an employee or because of whatever. And, for helping out and doing stuff like that, they were kind enough to give me the black one that I have here. But again, it wasn't a thing where they sent it to me and I was like, "Oh, I love this because they gave it to me." I was a user for a year and a half before I ever even spoke to them. So that happens often with a lot of the gear that I have. Same thing with the board brain stuff. They were kind enough to send this over to me because I asked for it. I did some chatting with them at KnobCon. Really loved what they were doing, got really interested. They said, "Well, we'd be interested in having you try it." I said, "Well, I'd be interested in trying it." So I did, and I loved it so much that it is now my main mixer in my main live setup. And I have other options. I have other mixers here. I have, this is my WMD Performance Mixer Mark 1 that used to be right here in this spot. I like the implementation of this one. So I ended up swapping those out. Now, I also, like I mentioned before, in my studio case, I'm beta testing the WMD Performance Mixer Mark II, which I also love. I think it's really great. It has a great spot in my production case, and I will keep it there. I think it's amazing. I love the WMD guys. I think it's a fantastic mixer. I think the upgrades they've made from the Mark 1 to the Mark II is amazing. They put everything in that it was missing. And so I think it's a fantastic mixer. It's not out yet. I think they're doing pre-sale still. It's not quite out yet, but it's an amazing one if it has the things you're looking for. What the board brain has that was really different for me is a couple of different things, just to explain why I use this. So one of the most important pieces was I wanted to be able to use my live hardware setup with my DAW to multi-track and produce tracks. Now, with the WMD, I have the option, there's a breakout module on the side, so I can take either pre-fader or post-fader signals from that mixer and cable them out to be multi-tracked out, which is already amazing. There's also a module that you can connect that it can use DB25 connectors to use a snake to come out from there, which is also amazing. Now, the difference with the board brain is this module right here, which is called the I/O. Can't see it because it's underneath all these cables, this I/O module. And with this one, there's a ton of different connections on the back of this mixer, and you can select which ones you want to use to connect to a module like the I/O, or they have another one that's the TRS, which is like full-size quarter-inch outputs. Then they have, there's a whole bunch of different modules that are like part of their mixer ecosystem. So with this, I'm able to have patched behind using ribbon cables underneath the surface of this. I have the 6 stereo channels pre-fader in one area, the same 6 stereo channel post fader in another section of outputs. I have both of the returns, the effects returns, as their own stereo outputs, and I have a stereo master output that I can use to record or do whatever I want, all coming from this mixer, all patched internally. So now when I go to play a show, I just disconnect these cables and I take my whole live set with me. Then when I come back and I want to use it to record, I can just set it down, patch those cables right back in here, and everything's connected. And I don't lose the performance aspect of the mixer when I'm multi-tracking into my DAW. Where another way to do this, for example, would be to use like an Expert Sleepers, like an ES9, but then you have to have all of your modules patched into the ES9 to be able to send that out. So you miss your whole mixer. Unless you have them come into the mixer, then use another module to go out from the mixer. Then you go from that mixer or that module to the ES9 with patches. Then you have to take up a ton of space in your case. And if you're worried about having a small case that you can travel with, as I am, having a solution like this was amazing. So having something that's just 8 HP that can do pre-fader and post-fader and stereo returns and master all in one module was amazing to me, because that when I'm traveling with this, I don't have any of this patched, so that's kind of dead space. Although I will say, this is another interesting thing about this, is that because these are available, all of a sudden I started to find uses for them. So even though all these ones down here, this is all of the post fader outs that I'm using for recording right now, all these pre-fader outs are still active. So this one that you see right here, this is the kick drum right here. This is a pre-fader out from that kick drum, and this is actually going over and going into an input on the Digitac 2 so that I can use it as a trigger for the sidechain that's internal in this. So I'm using that external channel. I wouldn't have been able to do that from here. I would have had to use a multiple to split this channel and then send it out to that from there. This way, I just have it there available. So if I want to use it, I can plug it in. If I don't want to use it, I don't plug it in. So for me, that was a really amazing combination. And the Board Brain mixers, the whole Board Brain company they're really focused on mixers specifically. So their modules are really kind of like a mixer ecosystem. So there's all different ways that you can output from them and expand them and use them in all sorts of different ways. So you can really kind of customize and build your own ideal mixer for your case. So that's why I switched, why I really love this one. And so, yeah, I mean, it has a bunch of other things as well, which are really neat. So like, for example, every one of the channels is stereo, but you can also plug in 2 mono signals, which, like, for example, with the Mark I of the WMD, you could put in 2 mono signals and then you could switch between them. With these ones, you can plug in 2 mono signals, and if you press this button right here, it turns blue. The pan, since you're not stereo anymore, the pan becomes a crossfader between those 2 mono signals. So in the middle, you're getting both signals full, and then you can go all the way to the left and you're only getting the left signal, and you can go all the way to the right and you're only getting the right signal. So your 6-channel mixer in effect becomes a 12-channel mixer if you're using mono signals. So yeah, of course those would share the same send and the same fader, but to be able to have just that kind of expandability, particularly when you're like me and you use almost exclusively mono synths, just having that ability is amazing. So you could put, let's say, 2 different kicks on one track, and then you can fade between those 2 kicks using the crossfader knob. So it just, there's a ton of opportunity and flexibility with this setup, and that's why I'm using it. So it's like, it's not because of any kind of paid placement or whatever. They said, try it. If you like it, keep it and use it. If you don't like it, send it back. And that's kind of the deal that I work with everybody is I'll take something and I'll try it out. And if I don't like it, it'll go right back. And so that way somebody else can get the benefit of it if I'm not finding the benefit in it. And so you won't see it on the channel if it's not something that I like, just because somebody paid me for it or whatever. So, because I don't do that. So anyway, a little bit about how the channel works. Anyway, let's look back in the chat. Oh, just to finish up on that last thing, that originally was a question about teenage engineering. So just to really quickly go into why I'm really interested to try the OPXY. And like, think whatever you think about the cost and value and whatever, that's not the thing that I'm really interested in. I'm more interested in, is it even functional for me before I even think about is it something that I want to pay for? So the functionality part of it, the way I would use something like that is very much the way I'm using the Ableton Move, meaning that it's a battery powered, very portable sketch pad of things where I would start ideas and then I would move them into a DAW and finish them, or I would move them into my hardware live set and use them. So I have two solutions for that right now. The first solution is the Ableton Move. So with the Ableton Move, I can sketch out ideas, battery powered, while I travel, sitting on the couch, in bed at night, on a plane, it doesn't really matter. I can sketch out ideas, and then if those ideas are going to be part of a production, when I get back on my same Wi-Fi that it's connected to, it just shows up in the cloud version of Ableton, and I can just use their software to just transfer that over into Ableton, and it opens right up already as a project with any MIDI that I put in, any samples that I edited, any effects that I used from within the Move. So it's a super frictionless way to get an idea into the DAW and be able to finish it out into a full production. If I want to use something from that in my live performance, it's the extra step of it goes into the DAW, then I can convert it into a sample, a loop, I can resample it, I can do whatever, and then I just put those on an SD card and pop them into the black box. So I can use it functionally as a way to sketch when I'm away from my studio, which I travel quite a bit for my day job. So when I'm away from the studio, I can use it as a way to sketch. And then when I get back to my studio, it's frictionless to get it into my production and performance workflow. The other one that I use often is the Oxy One, because the Oxy One, a little touted fact, which I think more people should talk about, is that this has Bluetooth MIDI and it's battery powered. So I can be on a plane with just this and my phone, which is, where's my phone? I'll just show you guys here. So I can just go into my phone and I can open up the music apps that I have here. And let's say I want to use the Moog Model D. So I can just open up the Moog app, and I have this here, and I can make patterns and sequences from the Oxy via Bluetooth MIDI to this, and I can monitor it with my AirPods while I'm on a plane. I have no headphone cable, I have no MIDI cable, I have no power cable in any of that. I have the phone that I always have in my pocket, and I have my Oxy One that also easily fits in my backpack. So I can do that to create patterns in here using Bluetooth MIDI. And then when I get back to my studio, I can very easily convert those channels from Bluetooth MIDI to regular MIDI to go to one of these boxes, or to CV and gate to go into my modular. So I can come up with ideas that work in here, save them into here, and then when I get back, I just plug it in and I can do it. I can connect it to my studio modular, create a sample that I want to record, put it into the black box, and then I can use that on my live set. So those workflows work really, really well for me, which is why I use those pieces of gear, right? I tried the OP1, and with the OP1, it was, I loved everything about the form factor, the interface was cool, then I started getting into these kind of funky workflow things. Like you had to use the tape workflow, which doesn't work for me when I'm trying to quickly sketch out an idea. I quickly get frustrated if I don't enter it in exactly right, and I have to go back and redo it 25 times until I get it right on. Drove me crazy. I'm much more of a sequencer-based person, and there wasn't really any functional sequencing of the workflow in the OP1. And then if I was, by some miracle, able to create a sketch of something that I liked and I wanted to use it, there was absolutely no way, other than some really awful, painless workaround, funky, full of friction ways, to get that idea into either a DAW or my hardware setup. So it started off really awesome. The workflow got challenging for me because it wasn't the way that I generally like to work. And then the key piece to having a portable sketchpad, which is frictionless ease of getting things into your production and into your performance, was totally non-existent. The MIDI implementation was horrible. Other than just like recording it in and using it as a tape machine, and that was just too much for me. And I was like, nope, wasn't for me. So I sent it back. Now the OPXY fixed all that. So now it's a sequencer-based workflow. It has solid MIDI I/O implementation. It has the ability to be a sketchpad and then integrate painlessly with a DAW and integrate painlessly with a live setup. So seeing that they finally fixed all of those things that I couldn't stand, I'm really excited to try the OPXY. I don't have anything against them. Their machines just never really worked for me with my particular workflow. And so that's why you don't see them on this channel and you don't see me using them. It was actually kind of frustrating. I had an OP1 for a short amount of time, and that's when I got frustrated with the workflow. Then when the OP1 Field got announced, I was really excited. I was like, oh, I can't wait to try this, because I'm sure they fixed all those like dumb omissions of MIDI implementation, for example. And then I saw online exactly what it had, and I was like, yep, nope, they didn't fix any of it. It was, all they did was upgrade the audio converters and memory and some other things like sample rates. And I was like, okay, cool, but none of that was my issue with it. My issues with it were MIDI implementation and the ability to use it as a sketchpad that was functional with all my other gear. And they didn't fix any of that. So then when the OPXY came out, I was like, yes, this is exactly what I was hoping that the OP1 Field would have been, that it fixed all of those issues. So I am actually very excited to try one. I don't have an opportunity to yet. I can't afford to buy one, and I don't have a way to get one yet. I may be able to get one on loan. So if that's the case, I will definitely give it a try, because I'm not biased against them at all. I want to really love their stuff. I think it's beautiful. Yeah, I think it's a little expensive, and I think that they're a little bit more of a fashion brand, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they make amazing stuff for what it is. So I tried a TX6 as well. Loved the functionality of it. I think they made it about 50% too small. I think that if it was just slightly larger, like more the size of the black box, that it would have been way more usable as a performance mixer for live, and I would have kept it. But because it wasn't, I sent it back. I had that one on loan as well. So anyway, let's see. Is there any possibility of scheduling the live portions of your course in February, March to be compatible with Australia East Coast? So here's the thing. The courses are very international. So I tried to pick times where everybody could at least arrange to be around for them. So the call times are Sundays and Wednesdays, either at 10 or 11 a.m. Mountain Time, which is 1800 and 1900 Central European Time. Can't remember exactly Australian time. I think it's 14 hours difference from me. So that would make them at kind of midnight your time. I was trying to do the best to get them to where everybody could at least be available. But what I did to accommodate for that, for people who can't be on there live, every single one of the live calls is recorded. And then you can watch the recording anytime you want after the live call. And if you have questions that you want to ask for that particular session of that section of the course, you can just send me a message, and I'll ask and answer the question for you in the call, so that you'll still get your answer in the recorded version of the call. If you're able to make them, it's great. And that's why I did like one on the weekend, one on a weekday, and tried to do it in that kind of middle time so that it wasn't too early or too late for anybody. But it's really hard to get global time zones to work with the course. But yes, so you can definitely see all of those calls and hopefully see them live. And if not, you can see the recorded version whenever you like afterwards. So let's see, where else are we? Plumpy, yo. Use Ableton Link. I do not use Ableton Link at all, but just because I'm not using that as any part of my setup. So I'm using, so syncing with my DAW, there's two different ways that I can do it for production. So I have this USB cable coming into the aux 1, and this can go either way. Either I can put in the settings where the aux 1 controls the clock and everything in Ableton. So when I push play here, it starts everything. So I can record arm everything, and then when I push play here, it's when it does it there, which is what I do if I'm over here doing stuff while I'm recording in Ableton. If I'm at the desk, I'll do it the opposite, and I'll set Ableton to control the aux, and then the aux still controls the live setup just the same way that it does when I perform. That's everything except for the Dig Attack 2, which is connected to Ableton via Overbridge. So yeah, so that allows me to do multi-tracking plus MIDI sync for the Dig Attack 2. So yeah, let's see what else. What do you guys think of Behringer modules? I'm thinking of trying these out as I tip my toes into the module world and not to have break the bank while doing it. I have mixed feelings about the Behringer modules. There's this whole, the whole debate of Behringer in the hardware world and them kind of undercutting companies to copy their gear and stuff like that. I kind of roll my eyes at that a little bit, because a lot of times they're copying huge companies' designs that are 40 years old or more. And so in that, I'm like, okay, I don't necessarily feel the same kind of heartfelt thing. When it comes to modular though, because I go to a lot of the shows like Superbooth and KnobCon and Buchla and Friends and stuff like that, I know a lot of these manufacturers, and a lot of these companies are like 2 or 3 people that are making modules like in their garage. And so when a huge conglomerate like Behringer comes in and undercuts their prices and takes business away from these guys that are like just trying to struggle along and make a living and pay their staff, and they're not trying to like get rich, it's harder for me. So I personally don't use any of the Behringer modules for that reason. I would rather, pay the extra $50 or the extra $100 to get the real module and support these small modular companies that are really kind of driving innovation in the music business right now. So yeah, it's much harder for me to justify. First and foremost, because the savings isn't all that much. I mean, you're going to save $100 here and there, and it's not like you're, buy one less module instead of spending the $100 on, getting somebody else's gear that undercuts kind of these little guys who are just trying to make a living doing their stuff. So that's how I feel about Behringer modular stuff. As far as their hardware stuff, like I used to have one of the TB3s. I don't really like, or TD3s. I didn't really like it, and so I got rid of it. I have the Roland Boutique 303 module now. So cool. I also had for a while, I had the Behringer RD9 because I'm not about to spend $5,000 to $7,000 on a 909, but I wanted something that was kind of playable and to scale and kind of felt like that. And because I don't have a problem with them copying a design of somebody from 50 years ago that, they're not making that unit anymore. And if you want to get the real one, it's way out of anybody's price range. So I have mixed feelings. I'm not like all or nothing for Behringer, but I am when it comes to modular. I think that these modular companies are, for the most part, almost all of them are really small mom and pop organizations, and they're just trying to make payroll. So it's hard for me to justify giving that money to a conglomerate that's, running, the equivalent of synth sweatshops. It's just, I don't know, something feels gross about it. So that's why I don't personally do it, but also I'm not about to judge somebody else. Everybody's got their own priorities. So let's see. Also, I was curious, what do you play vocal samples off of? Off of the black box. So basically anything that is a longer sample that I want to time stretch without changing the pitch, I use the black box for. So if I need to have a vocal, I think I have some presets here that have vocals in those. Let's see here. Maybe not. No, I don't have any vocal things in here right now. Oh, hold on. I might in my 80 ones. Nope. Nope. I don't have any in here right now. But yeah, it's anytime I want to play something that needs to be time stretched, it gets played in the black box. Just because, like I said before, the thing I love with the black box and with the Octatrack both is that you can chuck a sample in there that's any length and it will determine the length and time stretch it for you. So you don't have to stress about it. With the Digitac 2, in order to use that stretch algorithm, it has to be perfect to the millisecond, or else as soon as you start changing tempo, you get artifacts in the sound and it totally distorts it, makes it sound weird. So if you're not sampling into the Digitac 2 at its set pattern length, which it will record perfectly, so then it will time stretch those samples perfectly. If you're not doing it that way, it's not great at the time stretching bit, whereas the black box really is, and so is the Octatrack. So yeah, let's see here. Greetings from Boise. Awesome. Come do a show. I would love to get to Boise. Some real good techno is needed. Find me a promoter that wants to book me and have them reach out. That goes for anybody on this stream, anywhere that you are in the world. If you've got somebody that wants to book hardware live techno, send them my way. I'm open for discussions with anybody that wants to. If it's Europe, I do have a couple trips to Europe planned in the coming year. I'll be going to Superbooth in May and to ADE in October, and I like to try and schedule gigs around those. Last year when I was in Superbooth, I played in Brussels and Berlin, and so yeah. If there's anybody in those areas that would like to book me or knows somebody who would like to book me, please send them my way. Good to get started with that now. Let's see, what else? My Oxy arrives today actually. Awesome. I think you'll love it. I love it, but we'll see. It's, I don't think I've heard anybody yet who can't stand it. I mean, some people, they struggle with it because it can do so many things. And I think that if you start off simple and do the simple things first, you'll never run out of things that you can do with it and you can learn with it. But you don't have to do everything all at once. So yeah, start off simple, and there's plenty of it that I don't even know how to do because I just don't use certain parts of it at all. So what's up, digital analog daily? Oh, you're dyslexic. Oh, Circo, not Circo. Got it. Wait for one to come up on reverb used. Are you saying the Oxy one, I'm assuming, because that's what we were talking about at that moment. Chris says, hey friends, question, does anyone know of any alternatives in external pedals like the Coslin frequency shifter? That's a good one. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what everybody puts in there. I don't know of any frequency shifting pedals, but I would assume that they exist. I just don't know of any. But yeah, Coslin is very cool. This module right here, which just basically takes frequencies and shifts them and kind of morphs and twists your sound in weird, bizarro ways, which is interesting in live performance. I have it on a send, so I can send little pieces of all of the other things to it. So I'll show you what it sounds like. I'll pull those off. So like, let's take, all right, so this is coming from the pizza right here. So if I was to send that to the Coslin, you'll hear. So you can hear it come in. So you can hear how it's kind of twisted the sound because it's taking the left and right and it's twisting them in different amounts. And then if you start to shift the frequency, and again, this is the original sound. Now, if you lengthen this out, you get even more interesting sounds. And then I have a filter on that as well. and then I can run that through effects. So again, all of that sound is just that one simple sound from the pizza going into the causal and being frequency shifted and then going through the ghost. So you want to talk about instant techno, right? You take something like that and then you just throw in a kick drum. You can just do a regular phone work. And then we add in some of those atmospheres that we were talking about before. So all that is just atmosphere and sub coming from the black box, a kick drum, and that one little 2-note thing going through the causal, through the filter, through the effects, and into here. So again, all of that sound that you're hearing is coming from, let it fade out here. All of that is coming from this. And again, I'll just bring it back up again. One cool thing about the way I have this set up is that the send that goes to the causal is a pre-fader send. So if I take out the original sound, it's still sending to the causal. So I can still... So that's without the fader up at all. So I don't have any of the original sound coming through. So it's kind of like parallel processing that sound. So I can still have part of the original if I want. And I can mix together how much of each of those I use. So this is cool because this just gives you just the affected version. Right? And also because it is pre-fader and because it's on a send, it doesn't just have to be that one sound. So let's take, for example, so let's say we want to combine this with that, with this. So I can take those back down again. So just remember what those sounded like. I can take those down. So this is just the pizza. So that's just the pizza going through there. But now I can mix in the Archer's rig as well. So again, pre-fader, so neither of those sounds are mixed in, but then I can mix in parts of the original. So then you can decide how much of each part of the sound you want in, and then you just throw in a kick. And then just by changing the knob on the Coslin, you're going to frequency shift all of the frequencies that are coming both of those instruments being kind of mixed into the send. So if I take out the original, and one of the rare pieces of modulation that I do have in this case is this right here is a sine wave coming from the pans into the FM input of this, so I can frequency modulate this as well. Right? So again, you see none of these faders are up. That's just a couple of sounds that I'm not even using that are chucked through there, right? So if I was to take those sounds out, and let's say, I don't have anything on that channel, but I'll just throw a random pattern on the bass line here. So then I can start to mix this one in. Again, pre-fader, so I don't need to bring the fader up. So everything you're hearing right now is just a random 4-note pattern from the bass line being sent through the frequency shifter and the filter, and then through the Ghost for effects. And then I can frequency shift it. Now, because this is going through a delay in the Ghost, then you can start to do some fun stuff where you shift around the timing of the delay. So again, if I pull this all back out of here, right? All that was this sound. That's what was coming from the Ericson's bass line that was going into the Cosland that was making all of those other sounds. So again, now that you've heard it, I'll pull it back out and I'll bring it back in here. And I'll bring the effects back in. Again, I haven't changed anything from that original sound. It was just still those same few random notes, but that's all coming from the Cosland and the filter and the Ghost. And again, I'll bring it back in the original so you can hear it. That's the original. That's the original without any effects. So anyway, that's the Cosland. Ask about a frequency shifter and let's jam out for 15 minutes. So yeah, that's what the Cosland does. So where are we? Looking forward to the Array 2. Model D is also not bad. Yes. Oh, the OPXY. Nice. Yeah, it's cool. I'd love to try it for sure. So Teenage Engineering, if you're watching this is your opening to have me love a piece of your gear. You should send that to me, but they won't. I'm not one of the cool YouTubers, so I won't get one. Let's see here. Eventide, yeah, could work. I don't know if Eventide does a frequency shifter, but it seems like they would if somebody would do it for sure. Cosland sounding amazing. Yeah, it is pretty badass, isn't it? It's a pretty cool module. It was really interesting. I was just thinking about when I was building this set, I wanted to come up with, again, as many options and as much kind of cool sound design flexibility as I could in a really small case. And that was, again, when I, with the Exelon mixer, being able to use 2 effect sends and have one of those be pre-fader, which is what I'm using the Cosland. The other one needs to be post-fader all the time. Again, with the WMD, the Performance Mixer Mark I, you had 2 effect sends, but you had to choose between them. You could only use one at a time. Now, again, I have to say this in all fairness, in the Performance Mixer Mark II, there's 2 effect sends and you can use them both together, just like this. And I believe you have to select, Yeah, so aux 1 is always post fader, and aux 2 can be either pre or post, and you can select it on the face, which is pretty cool. This one you have to select on the back with a jumper if you're going to use it pre or post. Not the end of the world, because I'm kind of using it always the same way, but if that was important to you, having that switch is a pretty cool thing, to be able to switch back and forth pre or post. So when I was looking at this, being able to set up 2 different effect sends together, and then thinking about how I was going to route them with the mixer. So having the Cosland be pre-fader was really important for me because of exactly what I just showed you. Being able to send things to it without having to have the fader up to hear the original, to be able to send things to it, and that I wasn't using at the moment. So I could take kind of any voice that wasn't necessarily part of what I was playing and just randomly send something to the Cosland, and then I've got a new voice of something coming in. So that was really important. Then I route the Cosland back into a channel instead of into one of the returns, so that I then have volume control over it, because it is in effect for me an additional voice. So I have volume control, and I have the effect send there, so I can then send it to my second send, which is the ghost. So that allows me to pre-fader mix using, however much I'm sending from the effects 1 to the Cosland, and then post fader, when the Cosland is up, send it to the ghost, so that I could add on that extra kind of cool ghosty stuff that the ghost does. Because if you're not familiar, it's a delay, a reverb, a high pass, low pass filter, a distortion, a compressor. It has sidechain built into it. It has an overdrive as well that's separate. And you can also change the way that you route all of those effects. So you can do it so it's like, so you can do effect, distortion, filter effects, or filter effects distortion. So you kind of decide which one you want to do with those in the routing. So it's just like tapping this button. There's 3 different settings. So you just decide which setting you want. So it's pretty cool, because you can change it really easily during a performance as well. So if you wanted a different routing for the particular kind of sound, you can switch that out pretty easily. But you can hear it has a ton of flexibility, and I use it a lot in my sets, kind of like the same way I use the atmospheres in the black box, but it's more of a controllable, more interesting atmosphere, because it's something that's using the sounds that are happening right then live in the set, but it's adding so many effects in that chain between delay and reverb and filtering and overdrive and distortion and stuff, that it becomes kind of like the Cosland. It becomes another voice that comes in. So yeah, I mean, I can show you. So for example, just using something simple like the pizza sound, just something simple like this, if I send this through the ghost, I have it turned down. That's why. Turn up the return. And when you add resonance to the filter, as you sweep the filter, you'll pick out different harmonics. And you hear those harmonics come in as if it's a whole nother synth, a whole other sound. So that pitch, that harmonic is in the original sound, but because the resonance is high, it's just picking out that particular pitch and sending that through the effects. So if you move that resonance, So you see, so now the filter resonance is lower, so it's picking up a lower harmonic from that same sound. And then as you move it up, here it picks up the next little bit, and then even higher. So again, you really get a lot of control over where the sound is and kind of what it's picking up. And again, that's just this sound. So if I take the effects out, that's the original sound that was making all of that sound. That was just all it going through all of the effects chain of the Ghost. So again, here you go. Right. So tons of flexibility with it. Again, the whole idea is to have a small case and be able to do a ton of different things. And so that's why having things like this Cosland chain and this Ghost effect send as well is really important, because that allows me to have really simple voices that have a lot of flexibility of control over them that I can then turn into a lot of things. So like, for example, the pizza, if you're not familiar with this, this has a 6 octave switch on it. So I can go from it being this high to be, right, and move it around. And then because it's an FM module, so it's you can decide how you want the FM to react. Right, so you can see it has a ton of flexibility just within the module. But then, just like what we were seeing before, you know, you send that to the Cosland, and then through the Ghost. And again, that's just 2 notes, but then you start to mess with the FM here, and that'll change the whole chain. Again, still all just those 2 notes coming through the pizza, or coming from the pizza. So we haven't messed with the sequence yet at all. Now you can make that a more complicated sequence. So all of this just to show you that all of this sound that you're hearing right now is coming from that. Right? So if you have the right setup and the right way to kind of layer things on top of things, but where you still keep enough control over those individual elements, and I love personally, and this again is not for everybody, I love the idea of like a conversation between me and the machines. And so I want the machines to say something. I want them to do something that I wouldn't have done, being like, they're going to make these kind of random glitchy sounds, or it's going to be this weird kind of phase with the Cosline when it does something that I would have never done. I would have never set that up with a modulation. So what I prefer to do is I prefer to have things that encourage exploration during performance, so that while I explore, while I'm performing, they can be giving me back inspiration and ideas in order to kind of keep things going and develop the next thing and move on to the next idea. So that's how my sets work, is that I'll just kind of get started with whatever I feel like, and then I'll be inspired by the sounds that come from the machines, and that will cue me ideas to move to the next thing and move to the next thing and move to the next thing. So yeah, that's kind of the way I do my sets. That's why I have it routed the way I do. And this kind of goes all the way back. Like, we started off talking about workflow and gear and stuff. And this is why pieces of gear like the Exelon are really important for me, because being able to route things the way these are routed allows me to do these things. If I didn't have the ability to do two effects at the same time, two sends, if I didn't have the ability to have one be pre-fader and one be post-fader, I wouldn't be able to do this, which I'm doing. So this is kind of gear dependent. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be the Board Brain Exelon, but if you want to do this the way I'm doing it, you need to have something that has two effect sends. So you're able to send those things out from whichever elements you want to send out. And it just offers a ton of flexibility that way. And what we didn't even touch on here is that, with the IO, like I mentioned, every one of these tracks still has another output over here that I could send, that Cosline output, I could send the pre-fader version of the Cosline through external pedals, like effects pedals, and then I could return them back into the mixer or into the Digitact and sample it. And like the possibilities are endless if you have like the routing down the way that you want, so that it allows you the flexibility to do this stuff. Like, that's the whole key, is being able to be flexible. Otherwise the improvised thing doesn't work. Really, like, because you don't have enough things that you can improvise with if you don't have flexibility within your set, so or within your rig. So that just becomes a real key. So let's see here. What do we got? Yo, what's up, Jordan? Finally made it to a live stream. Awesome. That is so good. So versatile, love it. Yeah, I built this for this. And I have to say, my favorite thing about modular is that not only do you get to play an instrument live, but you get to invent that instrument and build it before you even play it. And you can configure it and reconfigure it any way you want, so that it becomes your personal instrument that you made to play in a certain way. So I always joke, whenever you look at somebody's modular, it's like a window into their brain. You can see how they think based on what modules they use, how things are routed, and all of that stuff. And so for me, this right here is kind of a window into the way my head works creatively. So it allows me to be able to kind of do these things and have these options, these particular options, so that I can make the music that I like to make. So yeah, let's see what else. What about live loops? I don't really do much live looping. It doesn't really, it's not part of my workflow, because it's not that important to me. What the closest I get to live looping is looping sequences. So I am in effect doing those things, and they are looping on their own, but I'm not, because I have enough flexibility in my rig, I don't need to loop something and then let it play while I reuse that same piece of gear. So like if you watch Blawan and the way he performs live, he basically uses a modular and a multi-track looper where he'll make a sound, loop it, use the same case to make another sound, loop that on a different track, the same case to make another sound and loop that, and then he's kind of morphing, and he'll go back to the first one and overwrite it with a new sound, and then go to the second one and overwrite it with a new sound. So it's kind of like this ever evolving series of loops that he's writing live on the fly, which again, that's an amazing workflow. My brain doesn't work that way, so I don't think I could do what he does. But I love watching it because it's really creative and really clever the way he's taken the workflow of certain pieces of gear and decided, oh, okay, that's how that works. So now I can make this with that. And you know, it's very much the same with me. Like I can go in and say, oh, this is what the Koslin does. Okay, so I can make this with that. Or here's how the Ghost works, or here's how this mixer works. I can make these things with those. But for everyone that uses modular, or even with hardware as well, you kind of configure your own instrument. This whole thing is the instrument, right? You configure your whole instrument in the way that best works for you and your mind. That's whatever's your best workflow. So yeah, watching a masterclass. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. It's not a masterclass, but I appreciate it. This is just me screwing around actually, but it's fun to walk through and talk it out. This would sound amazing on a big system. It does. I will tell you, that's another thing that I have done with this system is I have made a system that sounds absolutely freaking phenomenal on big sound systems. So I have played this on some big systems like Function Ones and Voids and some really, really big systems, and it sounds amazing. So that's a function of all these companies doing great work to make it sound really, really well. Let's see what else. How do you split your tracks like drums and bass and other things? Do you mean in my live setup, or do you mean for recording in? I mean, it's kind of the same thing, so I'll kind of go through it. But if you just look, I mean, I've got everything labeled here in the mixer. I don't know if you can see on the bottom of the screen there. I think you can just barely see it. So track one is my kick. Just out of years of habit, I like to have my kick on the left side. Track one is the kick. Track two is the archer's rig, which is right next to it. And then everything else is in the order that it is in the case. So Ericsson's bassline, Bastel Pizza, BIA, Koslin, and then I've got my aux sends, which come in over here. So I have everything kind of divided out. There's kick and percussion, and then everything else goes this way. So if I kind of forget where I am, it's easy enough to pick it up and remember. And then I also label everything because as I tell my students all the time, you will be 50% dumber when you are performing live because it's dark and lights are flashing and you're hot and you're stressed and you had a couple drinks, and so like you will be 50% dumber when you're using this in a live setup. So label things, keep it as simple as you can, keep the layout a way that makes sense to you and that's straightforward, and practice with it like that so that you know what it is. Even I have things like labeled on the Oxy here. If I push this up, you can see. I have things labeled on the Oxy one here. So you've got like up the side here, I have the number of the tracks that they are. So on track one, it's a little different because this is all my things that are in my modular case. So they're labeled from bottom to top in the same order they are here. So bottom is my kick drum and so on. But then when I go to sequencer two, this is a multi-sequencer that is going to tracks 1 through 8 on the Digatone 2. So then I have this labeled as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then underneath it, it's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, because on sequencer 3, that's 9 through 16 in the Digatone. And then 4, I was using for the Digitac, but I'm not using anything in there right now. So, but anyway, it would probably be 9 through 16 because I'm using 1 through 8 sequenced internally. So then I still have it labeled 9 through 16. All of that is just to kind of keep things straight while I perform. So I'm like, because I have to be able to coordinate while I'm playing. Like if I want to bring in a sound over here, I want to make sure that the mute for that track is undone. So if I'm on sequencer 2, it's the mute for track 5. So that means that it's track 5 over here. So then I can go in and adjust that track. So just kind of keeping everything laid out in a way that makes sense to me is important. Even with the black box, so there's 16 pads or 16 channels in the black box for each kind of preset. And with this, with the launch control that I use for that, I have 1 through 8 volume across the bottom, then 1 through 8 pitch is right above that, then 9 through 16 volume, and then 9 through 16 pitch. So that way I have control over every single track, and it's set up that way for every preset. So if I change presets and I want something that's on track 1, I know it's fader 1. If it's on track 9, I know it's fader, or it's knob 9. So it just allows me to keep everything straight when I'm performing, so that I'm not like reaching for something and I don't know where it is. And it, like, that's how you get lost in a set, is by making things too complicated. So you can't find what you need to. And then you end up kind of tripping yourself up in the middle of a performance. So let's see here. To elaborate, how do you split highs, mids, and lows? Generally, and it's actually not set up like this right now because I've been screwing around with this so much, but generally within the boxes, so within the digitact and digitone, the lower the number on the melodic things, the lower the pitch. So like 9 through 16 goes from low to high, 1 through 8 goes from low to high, 9 through 16 goes from low to high, kind of general frequency bands. So if I need something in the high mids, I know that's going to be in like the 13, 14 area, would be kind of like the high mids, 13, 14, 15, something like that. And so I can bring in a tone that's going to fit within that, just because I know where it is in that kind of kit of sounds that I've created, and then I'll sequence it from over here. It's not set up like that right now because I've just been messing around with these. And then with the modules that are in my case, there's not any real rhyme or reason to it, because intentionally these modules have the flexibility to be kind of any sound, or like kind of any frequency. So for example, if I bring in the BIA, take off the effects, so you can just hear it. So the BIA has a, you can shift 2 octaves per click on this. So it can be low or mid or high. Right? So you can easily shift. So depending on where you want to have those in your set. Same with the pizza. Like I said, you've got, so you can shift octaves. So it really kind of depends on what you need within your live set. So again, like I said, I get inspired a lot by what I'm hearing from the machines, and from like, I'm like, oh, I'll find myself in an area and go, oh, this is kind of cool. You know, this is new. And so then I'll be playing along and go, you know what this needs? This needs, you know, something on the high frequencies. I don't have anything interesting there. So then I'll go through and, ooh, did I just lose? Oh, I just lost headphones. One sec. Battery died. There we go. Now I can hear. So basically, I'll say like, oh, I want something in the high frequencies, and I know which of my pieces of gear will do a high frequency thing. So maybe I'll bring in, you know, the Archer's rig, and you know, this is kind of mid-range, but maybe I'll. So it's something that can come in that high range. Or maybe I take the BIA, and I move it way up, or in the middle. Or I can do the same with the pizza. I can turn that way up, frequency-wise. Or if I've got this one in that range and I want something in the mids, I can turn the pizza to the mids. And then if I need something in the lows, I can do the sub oscillator on the bass line. can hear, then I've got 3 different sections that still kind of work together. They still kind of fit because they're all in different frequency bands. So again, it goes back to the same thing I was mentioning with the sound design part of this. Having things that you have the flexibility to do a lot of different octaves with gives you a lot of freedom to be able to use the same voice for a lot of different things. When I first started out, it was like, okay, this is going to be my bass voice, and this is going to be my lead voice, and this is another lead voice, and this one's for percussion. And I found that that was just taking up too much space in the case, and I was getting a lot of things that sounded really the same. So there's going to be times where I'll have the BIA, and I'll say, you know what, I want the BIA to be a bass part now. You know, and then I'll go in and I'll sequence it. Right? And then you've got a bass line. Okay? But then maybe I say, okay, well, I want the BIA to be a hi-hat. So then I'll shift this up here. Right? So then it can be that. So it's just a matter of having things that are really flexible enough that you can turn them around and twist them around into kind of whatever you need them to be. And that's what I really love about these. For example, the Archer's rig, this is supposed to be a hi-hat module. So if I was to go like to this engine, you know, this is a hi-hat. Right? So that's a hi-hat. That's what it's supposed to be, is a hi-hat module. But then you can change it to other things. So I can go to an FM engine. And that's just one of the engines. So you see, you can get a ton of flexibility out of one module. And that's kind of, that's the common theme. Every time you watch one of these streams, you're probably getting sick of me saying this, but it's like flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. Like, it's so important when you have a small case that you've got the ability to do whatever you need in one place, rather than having to be like, okay, this thing is only for this, and I'm only going to use it for 5 minutes of my set, and it's taking up, you know, 10% of my entire case just for that one moment. And for me, those things are unusable. For me, those things live in my production case. They live in my big studio case, because those I can afford the space to make that really cool sound, and then I'll just sample that so that I can use that later, because there's just not space for it in a case this size, in order to have it still be flexible enough. Like I posted a live stream like a week ago where I was going to stream for an hour, and I ended up streaming for 3 hours, and it was all completely improvised, because all these things have so much flexibility. I mean, I could have gone for 6 hours or 8 hours if it wasn't like the middle of the night and I needed to get some sleep. So just having that kind of flexibility is really important for a live set like this. So let's see here. Makes sense. Cool. Awesome. Glad you liked it. So the Archer's rig is so dope. I totally agree with you. Any more questions? Any last minute questions you guys have? Otherwise, we're going to call it a day here. I think I've probably bored you guys to death with all my talking today. So yeah, we started off talking about why you don't want to be Dawless, why you should be all the things. Use all the things. Use all your tools and get the best you can out of your hardware, get the best you can out of your software, and yeah, use them together. Use them each to supplement the other. And you're just going to end up making better music that you enjoy making more. And it's more fun when you take a bunch of those things out of your way. And so, yeah, I would suggest you do all the things. But besides that, yeah, if you have other questions about anything, pop them in the chat. Otherwise, you can ask them in the comments of the video. Happy to answer any questions there. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me. And if you're interested in any of the courses, again, in the video description, there's a link to circlelive.com/courses. Enrolling right now at a discount of 20%. And you can enroll for the current December ones. You've only missed one call, which you can see the recording of, and you still can jump right in on those courses for the performance course or the production course. And then also enrolling for the January and February courses for both as well. And if you're just interested in doing just the video only course, there's a version of that as well for performance. So you can just watch the videos in your own time and you don't get any of the one-on-one or any of the live calls, but for some people that's what they prefer. So you can do that as well. And all those are 20% off right now if you book right away. I can't remember when we have the discount expiring, but it's pretty soon. So if you want to do that, go ahead and book as soon as you can. And then, yeah, I look forward to seeing you in the courses or on the next live stream or online somewhere, or hopefully at a show. If you've got somebody in your town that is a promoter that's looking for a live techno, send them my way. I'm booking gigs now for 2025, so happy to come to your town if you've got somebody who wants to bring me there. So thank you guys all for joining in from all over the world. I really appreciate it. It's very cool, and thanks for the chat and for the interaction. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you guys all the next time.